Joined now by Bucky Brooks. You know him from the NFL Network. Some of us who are old enough remember him from the glory days back in the golden era of Jaguars football. And you're going to see a lot more of this guy coming around in the fall. But let's start where you are right now in Los Angeles, working for NFL Network. How is life under quarantine going for you?
Oh man, it's been a different experience. Obviously, when you live in LA and the entertainment industry is so prevalent and everything is just kind of grinded to a halt. The only things that are open are you have your restaurants that are doing takeout and delivery. You have your grocery stores and your drugstores, but outside of that, it's a bit of a ghost town. And so, as you can imagine, like even having to deal with the stuff in Jacksonville, it is a new norm. You know, it's a new norm in terms of just kind of navigating around the city. It's a new norm in terms of having your kids around doing virtual school. It has been quite a challenge, but as uncomfortable as it may be for me, I'm fortunate because I'm able to work. There are a lot of people that are hurting, so I'm just hoping that we can find an end to all of this, and hopefully everyone can kind of get back on their feet.
Yeah, I think everybody hits their knees at night praying for that. Bucky, before we dive directly into the Jaguars, how about a big picture? The story going around that the general managers and scouts and personnel folks would like to push the draft back. The league is holding firm that it's going to be the last week in April, as has scheduled. In what format, none of us are really certain. Your thoughts on that and how difficult it would be as a personnel man, because people know you have been a scout in this league, to go forward with the draft in uncertain times.
Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge for personnel departments, obviously, because we're creatures of habit. We're so used to being on a schedule and having a routine. This time of year would typically be about the time where the scouts kind of descend upon the respective cities. They get into the facilities and they spend the next couple weeks meeting and setting the draft board and going over scenarios and situations that could occur on draft day. Also, a little prior to this, you would have had 30 guys visit the facility, players that you would spend 24 hours with to get to know, to get them comfortable with your coaches, to be able to do any of the medical stuff that you want to do. And beyond that, you would have had the pro days. And so it's a bit of a change, but I do believe, like all general managers, they all have contingency plans. And so I'm sure everyone is kind of working on plan B and C to navigate how they'll work through a draft that, you know, it may be a virtual draft. It may be something unlike anything that we've ever seen. But the good organizations have a plan. They'll follow to that plan, and they'll still be able to make picks. I think the reason the league was insistent upon keeping it where it is because there's no real end in sight, and delaying it doesn't necessarily mean that we would be able to kind of go about our business as we know. And so I think the league just kind of wants to continue to operate as normal.
Might we find in this process, Bucky, that they don't need as much time or as much information to be able to pull off a good draft?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. Brian, I've always been a believer that if the draft was held closer to the end of the college football regular season, as opposed to where it currently is held, the draft would look a little different because you wouldn't be influenced by a lot of stuff that's not necessarily football related. You wouldn't be as impacted by the combine and workouts and seeing guys run around in shirts and shorts. Now, you need to have the medical stuff because you want to know the risk that you're assuming and taking on some players. You would like to have more time to spend with them to see how they fit character-wise and building the chemistry of your team. But in terms of evaluating players, if you have a good feel for what you're looking for and how it fits in with your team, you should be able to get the information based off what you've seen personally and also off the tape.
All right, so give us your perspective on the Jaguars to date from 10,000 feet sitting out there in California. They've obviously had a bit of a purge to the roster, made some moves to get some draft choices. How do you see the Jaguars right now?
I mean, like what's normal is you typically have about a 25 to 30% turnover over your roster each year. I think what the Jaguars are doing, I think Dave Caldwell and Doug Marrone are trying to put their stamp on the team. Like now that they are fully in control and fully have the ability to kind of build a team in the image that they want, I think you can tell how they're going. I think you're seeing a team that is a little more blue collar oriented, a little more, hey, we're going to go about our business without a lot of fanfare. I think the chemistry and the connectivity between player the player, player the coach, I think that matters. And so I think what you're going to get are a lot of hard hat and lunch pail guys. When you look at the free agent signings, a lot of those guys have been productive, but they've been productive without a lot of fanfare. And so most teams are kind of built in the image of their coach. And I think you're beginning to see Doug Marrone really kind of put his stamp on how this team is going to look like. And I think that will probably extend into the draft. Like I would expect those players to kind of fall in line with that model.
When you build around anything other than the quarterback, your window is going to be pretty short. And that's why I seem to think that now is the time for the Jaguars, with all the draft picks that they've got, is to go get one of the quarterbacks. What do you say about that?
Well, I mean, I think there are a couple of different ways to build a team. Obviously, the easiest way is if you have a marquee quarterback, a high-end quarterback who is capable of getting it done without necessarily having all of the pieces around him. Well, that's the easiest way to go build a champion. If you don't have that luxury, then you have to kind of do it in what we call a complementary football fashion, meaning the running game has to be stout and stellar. The defense has to play at a high level. Special teams has to be able to flip the field and put you in position to score points. And then your quarterback needs to be one that can manage the game, understand situations, not mess it up, and make the plays when they're there. Jacksonville has to figure out what's the quickest way to kind of jumpstart this. We saw the Tennessee Titans a year ago do it with Derrick Henry, journeyman off the scrap heap, and Ryan Tannehill kind of found his way, and it worked out for him. Now, as you alluded to, you don't know how long that model can be sustained, but it's one of those things where it can be done. This year, when the Jaguars are drafting, you're talking about at 9, is there a quarterback that's available? Is there one that you can build around? Is it a Justin Herbert? Is it a Jordan Love? I think what you have to do is you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. You got to dig deeper and see which one of these guys really fits how we want to play next year and the next 5 years. When I look at Justin Herbert to me is an A1 quarterback, meaning he is an experienced player. He's a 4-year starter at Oregon. He's won a significant amount of games. He's a college graduate. He's completed a ton of passes. And we saw at the end of the year that he has the ability to use his legs as well as his arm. There's a belief in the scouting community that was a bit held back because Mario Cristobal and that Oregon staff didn't want to expose him to hits because they didn't have a good backup quarterback. Well, Pac-12 title game, the Rose Bowl, we saw him run around a little bit. And now you begin to see a quarterback who can do some of those new school things that we're seeing these young quarterbacks do to have success in the league. I really like him a lot. He is a player that has the ability to kind of navigate it, but he does it in an understated manner. When you look at Jordan Love will be compared to Pat Mahomes in terms of his playing style. He can make these off-platform throws. He has a little bit of the gunslinger to him where he can make these wild plays. However, his final season at Utah, he had a lot of change. New coaching staff, 9 new starters on offense, didn't play as well, had a lot of turnovers. But if you go back the previous season, 32-5, 32-7 touchdown to interception ratio, you saw him play at a good level. So if you're a coaching staff, which one is going to show up when he comes to Jacksonville? Is it going to be the one that we saw as a junior dominate, or is it going to be the one that played in his final season and you just don't know? I think either one of those guys can do it, but if you're Jacksonville, you have to weigh, well, what do those guys look like compared to Gardner Minshew? Do we feel like they're a significant upgrade over Minshew? Because if they're not, maybe we need to best support Minshew and continue to keep it going the way that we finished the season.
That's an interesting question, and it's one no one seems to have an answer to. What did you see from Gardner Minshew? If you were calling the shots in Jacksonville, how comfortable would you be with him as your starter going into it? The numbers say you might be pretty comfortable, but we didn't see a lot last year. We didn't see a productive running game with him or a strong in the middle of the field tight end, great blocking. What do you think of Minshew?
Look, I think he's a surprise based on where he was a pick. It's uncommon for a 6th-round pick to be able to jump right in the lineup and play and have a level of success. And then you point to the things that he didn't have at his disposal. Didn't necessarily have a tight end. Defense didn't play the same way. There appeared to be a bit of an identity crisis in terms of how to play with the personnel that you have. You have Leonard Fournette, who is a little more comfortable being in the eye, being a downhill runner. You used a little more shotgun at the beginning of the season, and it didn't quite mesh. You wonder, with Jay Gruden coming in, can Jay Gruden take all the pieces of the puzzle and make it work? Can he take Tyler Eifert and feature him in the middle of the field so now DJ Chark and the wide receivers on the outside can get loose? Can he build a more traditional running game with Leonard Fournette as the centerpiece and allow Garner Minshew to operate a little more under center, a little more play action, take shots down the field in favorable situations instead of kind of putting it all on his shoulders? I think if you're Doug Marrone and you're Dave Caldwell and the mandate is to win and win right away to get into playoffs, I think you may be a little more inclined to go with what you have at quarterback and see if you can get the other stuff around him to improve. And maybe that'll get you to 8, 9, 10 wins if everything falls your way.
All right. Well, I mean, that's the big all-encompassing question is what do they do at quarterback? Let's assume that they go with Minshew based on what he did last year. And then that if they put better talent around him, he'll be more prepared. At 9, at 20, what are the best options for the Jaguars?
You know, when you're the Jaguars and you're sitting at 9 and 20, I think it's about taking the best player available. And there are going to be some talented players because there's going to be the run on quarterbacks at the top. And that can mean that some players that are really top players could be sitting at your lap. Mock drafts are one thing, but I think mock drafts give you a little perspective on what could be available. And I think when you've tracked the mock drafts for the Jaguars, Derek Brown has typically been available. Jeffrey Okudah has suddenly been a guy that has popped up and been available. There are also guys, when you think about like a C.J. Henderson that played down the road at Florida, a cornerback who's very, very talented. Those guys could be available. And then at 20, it's a matter of how do you attack the top of the draft? If at 9, you're able to get an interior defensive presence, now I'm looking for a cornerback that can step in and play. Let's be honest. Since they lost Jalen Ramsey and then you trade away A.J. Boye, you have to have an elite-type cornerback to show up at some point. Is that guy available at 20, or do you find that guy available at 9? I think if you're Dave Caldwell and you're running the draft, you're going through all these scenarios, but the thing that has to be clear and apparent, you got to walk away with 2 high-end starters. When you have capital like they have in the draft, you have to make sure that in the first round you hit on your picks.
All right, let me do a little lightning round with you and throw a couple of names at you. You tell me your first impression, and we'll start with the most high-profile issue with Jacksonville right now besides quarterback, and that's Yannick Ngakoue. What do you do with him?
Oh, you have to keep him. And I know he may not be happy. He may not be satisfied with whatever the situation is, the environment. But I think you have to keep him because he's a really good player. And so if you pair Yannick Ngakoue opposite of Josh Allen, you now have 2 athletic pass rushers, 2 guys that are capable of getting double-digit sacks in this league, a pass-happy league. You have to be able to affect the quarterback. Both of those guys can make impact plays. I am finding a way to keep Ngakoue in the fold, whether it's by making him play on the franchise tag or even sign him to a long-term deal, despite what he said on the outside.
Calais Campbell is gone, which means it's Josh Allen's turn. He had a tremendous rookie season, second only to Nick Bosa. Your thoughts on what he did and what you think he's capable of becoming?
Oh, I expect him to pop in a major way in his second season. Very mature player, a guy that kind of plays with the wisdom beyond his years in the league. I think when you clear the decks with Calais Campbell and some of the other veterans getting out of the locker room, it enables him to kind of grow into a more prominent role. I think he has the maturity to handle that. I think with his work ethic, his style of play, I think he really, really has an opportunity to be a dominant player in the league. They need him to be. The Jaguars need him to be a dominant player. So it's very important that you find a way to make him very, very comfortable in what he's been asked to do and let him thrive in that role.
Juwan Taylor looks like he's going to be an excellent, if not a star, right tackle. The Jaguars' offensive line, the coaches and the scouts aren't as down on that unit as a lot of us on the outside are. There are going to be big guys available for the Jaguars. Your thoughts on the offensive line as a group?
Well, I mean, I think the offensive line is something because the offensive line, basically, you have 5 fingers that have to play as one. They have to play as a fist. They have to play together. And injuries, chemistry, a lack of continuity can affect that in any way. I think the coaches know, and also given Doug Marrone's background as an offensive line guy, kind of knowing what that looks like up front, I think they should be encouraged by how that unit plays. I think the big thing is, can they mash people the way they want to mash people up front? This division has increasingly become a very physical division, with Tennessee winning the division and going and having a long playoff run. You have to be ready to beat them at their own game. And so I think it's about being a rock solid physical program. And I think some of that not only stems from the personnel, but it stems from the play calling. So with Jay Gruden taking over as the offensive coordinator, can they be a little more committed to running the ball, even when everyone in the stadium knows that the Jaguars are running?
All right, let's finish it with this. Daniel Jeremiah, Moving the Sticks. I don't have to tell you it's one of the best podcasts out there. The numbers do. You guys have incredible listenership. Why? How has that become such a tremendous success, Bucky?
It's funny because DJ and I knew each other as scouts on the road. I made the transition into the media before he did. He came over, and I was working on a different podcast. And when we joined forces and got together, it was a unique perspective because you have two former scouts, two guys that had worked in the business, that were on the media side, and we were able to have basically behind the scenes conversations on air. And our chemistry, our respect for one another, our relationships as friends has enabled it to pop. And then we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of good guests come on, and they settle in, they get comfortable. And what we have is what we would say are real football conversations, and we just have the mic on. And so it's been a great success. It's been fun working with them. It's been fun for me learning more about the game, just learning more from people, because people are willing to share. And I think that's the great common denominator in football. Everybody that I've found, they all love talking ball. And so for me, it's just another opportunity to talk ball.
Well, here's hoping we're talking real football again soon and through all this coronavirus mess.
Yes, for sure.
Bucky Brooks, a member of Duval. It's great to have you on. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Brian.